Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. You're with me, Mazina Ismail, and you're listening to this program, Man and Nature. And Alhamdulillah, Man and Nature this week, we'll be speaking on this topic, sustainability. If last week we discussed on doing justice to nature, we will continue on greening the earth this week. And to do that, we have Dr. Shaikh Muhammad Saifuddeen bin Shaikh Muhammad Saleh, who is a senior fellow, come director at Center for Science and Environment Studies at IKIM. Assalamualaikum, Dr. Shaikh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you for joining us again in this program.
Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure.
Alhamdulillah. As I mentioned just now, that last week we have spoken on the topic of doing justice to nature. This week we
Yes.
will continue on the same topic, which is sustainability, but we'll be speaking on greening the earth. So, inshallah, how would you like to relate the two topics to each other?
Right. Thank you, Haja Mazlina. First and foremost, I would like to say Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh and a very good afternoon to all our listeners of this program, Men and Nature. Alhamdulillah, we meet again on the air this week to continue our discussion and sharing of information regarding sustainability. So, in essence, as you said, our discussion today is a continuation from the previous episode. If in the previous episode we looked at the from the perspective of doing justice to nature, and we have also I've also shared some of the principles of Islamic eco-theology, namely Tawheed, which
Mhm.
is at the core of these principles, and then the principle of Khalq or creation, the principle of Khilafah, which can be looked at from the perspective of vicegerency or from the perspective of being a trustee or a custodian, and then the principle of mizan or balance, and also the principle of syukur or being thankful. So all these principles are actually part of the thinking of Islamic eco-theology, and as discussed, these principles are some of the things that can lead towards sustainability. In the previous episode also we have looked at some of the practices that we can practice within ourselves in order to ensure that sustainability takes place. So all these are important things that we have to be aware of, and we have to remind ourselves from time to time. And these actions, inshallah, if practiced, can lead towards a better world, in the sense that uh, with the view that we are currently facing crises such as climate change and
Yeah.
environmental degradation. So there has to be affirmative action to arrest the situation, to mitigate the problems that we are facing today, so that what we have today can at least be preserved for our future generations' survival. So
Mhm.
today we are shifting our discussion towards greening
Mm.
the earth, and this is also in line with sustainability. And I hope that from today's discussion, we will have some more ideas of what we can do in order to uh, help mitigate the problems that we're facing vis-a-vis the environment.
Right, thank you. So, Dr. Shaib, before I ask on the stance of Islam regarding efforts of greening the earth, we have
Yeah.
repeatedly mentioned about how human nature, that works as a vicegerent or custodian, and of the earth, and we have the right or the freedom to utilize the earth according to our needs. But
Yes.
how actually is there any guidance to that according to Islam on regarding that efforts?
Okay, I think when we look at our role as custodian or steward of the planet, we have to remember that we are actually being put on the earth as a representative of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala to manage whatever resources that we have on the earth.
Mm-hmm.
But I think one thinking that I think is a mistake on many of us is that we regard whatever there is in nature as something that we can use to our whims and fancies. In other words, we try to use nature without actually thinking that it is a resource that we have to manage very very carefully.
Mm-hmm.
So I think one thing that we should always try to do at the same time is to look at nature, learn from nature, and try to imitate nature in order for us to continue to survive on this planet. So I think the role of Khalifa
Mm-hmm.
is to manage our resources well in a balanced and sustainable manner. And at the same time, we also need to learn from the natural world. There are things that we can imitate that can ensure that we live in a way that is more sustainable rather than the way rather than the modern way of living that we have today, is which is very much commercially driven, in the long run it is not something that is sustainable for everyone, even for the natural world. So I what I have in mind is to bring this particular issue as one of our upcoming topics,
Mm-hmm.
how we can learn from nature in order for us to continue our survival on this planet.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. So, what are the considerations in Islam now pertaining to greening the earth?
Okay, thank you, Haja Mazina. I think when we look at Islam, especially from the primary sources, the Quran and the Hadith, we can see that actually the idea of greening the earth by planting trees is not something that is alien. It is mentioned
Yeah.
in many verses of the Quran. For example, we in from Surah Al-An'am, verse 99, a very lengthy verse, which translates as follows: It is He who sends down rain from the skies. With it, we produce vegetation of all kinds. From some, we produce green crops, out of which we produce grain, heaped up at harvest. Out of the date palm and its sheath come clusters of dates, hanging low and near. And then there are gardens of grapes and olives and pomegranates, each similar in kind, yet different in variety. When they begin to bear fruit, feast your eyes with the fruit and the ripeness thereof. Behold, in these things there are signs for those who believe. From Surah Al-An'am, verse 99. I think this is a very popular verse, often
Mm-hmm.
quoted, which actually highlights the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created all these greeneries for our usage. But what another message that lies behind this particular verse, and also some other verses, is that there has to be efforts for us as custodian of the planet uh,
Mm-hmm.
to to plant trees, to green the earth, in order to one, it can help for us to get sources for food, but at the same time, as modern science has shown, with increased greenery, this can actually help to mitigate problems such as earth warming.
Mm.
So we know that the earth is getting warmer, and one of the ways that have been shown to be successful in mitigating, not solving altogether, but at least mitigating the condition, is by
Yeah.
planting more trees. This is one of the things that we can use as a consideration when we talk about greening the earth. There are verses in the Quran that actually encourages us to plant trees, and also to make our surroundings greener.
Mm-hmm.
But not forgetting, when we talk about um, greening the earth, it's not just about planting trees, but it's also about inculcating green practices. This is something that we've actually discussed in the previous episode. We talk about the need to reuse, repurpose, recycle. These are some of the things that can
Mm-hmm.
actually help in ensuring that the earth becomes greener in a way. Although
Yeah.
indirectly, for example, if we take the example of paper, if we use less paper, if we do not print everything using paper, then that is actually a way for us to green the earth, because we don't actually rely on paper, which is made from pulps from trees. So less trees are being cut. Or if you need to print something on paper, then make sure that you print on both sides. So these
Yeah.
are some of the things that we can do. We can inculcate within ourselves as
Mm-hmm.
part of green practices or green
Mm-hmm.
actions that can also help towards greening the earth.
Right. It is important to have the right knowledge about greening the earth, as you said, Dr. Shah, so that we will use instead of abuse the resources that we have in this earth. So, what effects actually do greening the earth has on the planet? Speaking on education.
Right. As I mentioned earlier, one of the effects that has been highlighted quite recently is that
Mm,
the when we green the earth, it actually helps to mitigate surface warming. From a study conducted and was published about, I think, 2 years ago, increased vegetation has actually have a cooling effect on the land due to increased efficiency of heat and water vapor transfer to the atmosphere. So this is the effect of greening the earth. And the greening of the lands during the first 15 years of the 21st century represented an additional heat dissipation from the surface equivalent to 5 times the total energy produced and used by humans in 2015. And this greening induced cooling effect was 25 times stronger than the warming effect caused by tropical deforestation. Now, the vegetation cooling effect is large from the energy dissipation perspective, but in reality, it is only about 10 to 20% compared to the pace of global warming. In other words, the pace of global warming is quite fast. The cooling effect from greening is less significant in tropical forests with high leaf areas. So we can see that there are some effects of greening the earth, but at best it is very much a mitigating effect rather than something that can resolve or uh, take away the problems that we face, especially with regards to global warming. So this is an issue that we have to bear in mind.
mhm,
While greening the earth is a way that can help, it doesn't solve the problem. But at least we are trying to do something that can actually bring about mitigating effects that can help us to at least stabilize the
mhm.
rising temperature.
All right, but speaking on the realities, perhaps one question that must be asked with all the logging and felling of trees taking, places all over the world,
Yeah.
is the world greener today?
Well, I think that's a matter of perspective. Do you define greener earth with regards to forests, or do we look at agriculture, the crops planted for agriculture as also part of the green surface of the earth?
Mm-hmm.
If you look at remote sensing data, we can see that for the last 2 decades, the first 20 years of the 21st century, the earth actually has increased its green leaf area by a total of 5%, which is roughly 5.5 million square kilometers, an increase which is equivalent to the size of the entire Amazon rainforest. And the two countries that are leading in these respects in greening the earth are actually China and also India, the world's most populous and countries. And but if you look at the green that has increased, it doesn't actually come from forests. These are actually the greenery due to widespread crop farming. And each year, about 10 to 11 billion tons of carbon dioxide is emitted into the atmosphere from carbon sources, such as burning fossil fuels and tropical deforestation. About half of these emissions are stored temporarily in equal parts in the oceans, in soils, and also land plants, what we call as the Earth's carbon sinks. Green leaves produce sugars using energy from the sunlight to mix carbon dioxide absorbed from the surrounding air with water and nutrients soaked up from the ground. And these sugars, whose production helps eliminate carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, are the source of food, fiber, and fuel for life on Earth. Now, based on this knowledge, some will probably say that more greenery sounds like a good thing. So that's why we see that some countries, as I mentioned earlier, China and India, for example,
Mm-hmm.
stepping up on the greenery efforts, especially through planting more trees or crops in the agriculture sector. But the problem is, or the reality is, not
Mm-hmm.
all land plants are created equally. So, in other words, while we say that the initiatives in China and India are good. They
Mm-hmm.
are indeed ambitious. For example, China wanted to create the Great Green Wall.
Mm.
They are not enough because while we plant trees for agriculture, while we plant more trees for agriculture, it can never replace the value that forests have. The role that forests play is actually very large, and if we cut down forest trees, then they are irreplaceable in a way. It will be difficult for crops planted for agriculture to replace the role played by
Mm-hmm.
forests. But nonetheless,
Mm-hmm.
efforts such as this are something that needs to be done
Mm-hmm.
because it can help in reducing surface temperature, mitigate the climate change impacts, and also provide food source for the increasing population of the world.
Right.
So the thing is, I think we should try to find a balance between greening the earth in the agriculture using the agriculture sector, but at the same time we also need to look at the forest. We have to ensure that we do not cut down trees for no good reason. And if
Mm-hmm.
we do that, we need to replant the forest
Mm.
trees, which we know take hundreds of years to grow. So
Right.
this is a challenge for the modern population, for the
Mm-hmm.
modern people. Something that we have to be aware of, and this is something that is not easily done because today most of us live in cities far away from
Right.
forests. We do not actually see
Mm.
deforestation taking place. So this is something that we have to be, aware of and try to mitigate and minimize impacts of deforestation on our climate.
Inshallah. Before I proceed to my next question, I would like to read a few lines from Michael Jackson's song, Man in the Mirror. It says, I'm starting with a man in a mirror. If you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and then make a change. So, at the individual level, Dr. Sheikh, what can we do to help green the earth? Inshallah.
Yeah, thank you for that quote from the song. I think one good message here is that we have to begin with ourselves.
Mm.
If we believe in the effort to save the environment, to conserve, if we believe in sustainability, then it is important that we don't just talk about it, but
Yeah.
instead we translate what we say into actions that can be meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
In this regards, if you remember what I said earlier on in this episode, when we talk about greening the earth, it's not just about planting trees, but it's also about inculcating within ourselves green practices that can help towards sustainability. For
Mm-hmm.
example, we've discussed part of this in the previous episode. We need to practice refusing, reducing, reusing, repurposing, and recycling, because these are actions that can actually help towards sustainability. And how do we do this? I think for some people we may not be able to do everything, but don't leave out everything. Some of the easy things that we can do is to stop using single-use plastic. This can help the environment.
Mm-hmm.
We can help the environment also by burning less fuel. We can help the environment by saving energy. Whenever we are not in the room, make sure that we switch off the electricity. Um, as I said earlier, as one example, we print documents on both sides of the paper. This can also help the forest by reducing the need for
Mm-hmm.
trees being cut down to produce paper. We can
Yeah.
support eco-friendly businesses. I think this is an in thing in some countries, perhaps not so much in our country yet. But I think businesses can adopt an eco-friendly practice and promote this to the public so that the public has a choice. They can go to businesses that actually practices the green that have green practices in place. In fact, I've come across a document from the government for government agencies and departments to practice green procurement. What this means is that aside from practicing green practices, the agencies and departments need also to identify suppliers or companies that can provide services and products that actually have green practices in place. So
Mm-hmm.
this is what is termed as green procurement.
Right.
Um, at homes or in offices, we can use energy saving light bulbs. This is also something that is simple to do in order to practice sustainability. And of course, when we talk about actually planting trees, what we can do at our homes is to
Mm-hmm.
plant trees around our house. And this is something that can actually give a cooling effect to our homes. And if you remember, from my childhood days, for example, when we go back to our kampung, we have trees around our grandfather's or grandmother's house, and this actually gives a cooling effect to the house. And this is something that is lacking in the modern setting. Modern houses do not have this kind of greeneries. So one way to help us to cool down our house is to have plants around our homes, and this can bring down the surface temperature, and this can actually help us to rely less on air conditioning, for example,
Right. Mm-hmm.
and bring down the electricity usage and bill, and can also help towards conserving the environment. There are many things that
Mm-hmm.
we can do, of course. I'm sure our listeners can think of many other examples. But the important point here is number one, we need not just speak about it. We need to translate what we say into actions. And number
Mm-hmm.
two, if we can't do everything, don't leave out everything. At least do one
Mm-hmm.
or two, so that there is something that we can help in ensuring sustainability of the environment.
Right. Lucky you to have, the opportunity to grow up in such an environment you mentioned just now. For people like me, grow up in the city and we have not many chances of going back to the kampung as how it was in your time or people before you. We missed out that opportunity. So, it's time to give our children an opportunity to see, most of those green environment again, inshallah. Right?
Inshallah. Well, I think one of the things that can be done in urban areas is to have more green
Huh.
areas in terms of parks.
Yeah.
In some cities, we do have large parks for this purpose,
And
but I think this
forest
is something.
reserve.
Exactly. This is something that
Mm,
needs to be encouraged, and people like to go there to unwind, to rest, to exercise,
yeah.
and this is actually an effort that can actually bring down surface temperature of packed urban
Mm-hmm.
areas.
Right, inshallah. So, how would you like to conclude our discussion this week on sustainability, greening the earth? Inshallah, Dr. Share.
Well, I think the main point here is that we should not just stick to rhetorics. I think enough talking about this. It's time
Mm,
to translate our words into actions.
right.
And this is something that I think is the responsibility of each and every one of us. We cannot
Mm,
rely on somebody else to do this for us. Instead, we should start with ourselves, our family members, our community. And if this can be cascaded across the country, then inshallah we can see the much needed impacts that can actually help towards sustainability. This is easier said than done, of course,
yeah.
but for everything, everything begins with the first step. The first step
True.
is always difficult,
Mm-hmm.
but inshallah if there is istiqamah,
Mm-hmm.
then I believe that this is an effort worth taking, that we can help in ensuring that our future generation can also enjoy the beauty
Mm-hmm.
and also the richness of that the natural world has to offer.
Right, inshallah. The change starts with you, inshallah, and we hope that we will be given the strength to do the change, inshallah.
Inshallah, inshallah.
So thank you very much for all the reminders shared this week. Until we see you again next week, inshallah, Dr. Share. Assalamualaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.